14 steps of an audit. So in this quick section, we're going to quickly talk you through the logical sequence of tasks that you need to complete in order to complete a full service audit. Again, the point here is not to understand specifically how to do every one of these tasks, but to introduce what the sequential steps are, understand what the broadly each task is achieving, and that will mean that hopefully we have a bit of an understanding and know sort of where we are in the process. And then when we learn the specific or how to do those specific tasks, it'll make a little more sense because we'll kind of have that overall view. So in a particular order, I was about to say in no particular order, in a particular order, this is the order we follow when we're doing full service audits. So first of all, we have to load the tool. That means the process of loading our blank software with the specific characteristics of the bar that were entered during the last count and also when we did the setup. We're working on an upgrade that's going to make this happen faster, but it does take a couple of minutes at the moment with our Excel-based software. But as I said, the first thing to know is that there is a process by which you have to load up the software each time you do a bar audit. So the next thing is typically we'll arrive at the bar early in the morning, set the tool loading, and as I said at the moment that takes a couple of minutes, and so whilst that's happening we can gear up, which basically just means getting all of our physical pieces of equipment turned on, plugged in our pockets, etc., so that we don't constantly have to come back to our gearbox every time we need a new piece of gear. So gearing up involves pulling out your scale, turning it on, plugging into the USB, turning on your headset, either putting it around the back of your neck or straight onto your head, and making sure the dongle is plugged in if you have a specific dongle, or in some cases you might have a Bluetooth enabled scale, so just making sure that the Bluetooth is connected. Next, we would check that the dongle for the wireless barcode is plugged in. At the moment that works off a dedicated micro dongle, and then our barcode reader hangs off a key back, which is what you might associate with a janitor having a lot of keys, but that elasticated device that we put this barcode scanner on, hang it on our belt loop. It means it's always there, and it has enough of an extending cord that we can use it to scan barcodes at far length, but it's always there, ready to go. Obviously we need to pull the keg scale out if you're going to be doing weighing kegs or your keg stick. Headlamp I typically start by putting in my pocket so it's available, because there's some areas I'll have that on and some I won't. And then also we need to get our Sharpie ready for writing on our kegs, put it in my back pocket, and also the red pen that we're going to use to mark the invoices. I know this is pretty basic stuff, but again, we're trying to be efficient, so we try and do all that in one. And by the time you've done all of that, the tool will be loaded and you'll be ready to go and start counting. So stage C, counting. We do this first because the aim is to get all of the counting done before the bar staff come in, so we're not in the way. You'll quickly find if you ever get delayed and you're trying to do a count alongside a bartender who's trying to set up the bar, out of a sort of customer service experience or desire to provide one, you're going to have to be polite to the bartender, not get in their way, and it will slow you down a lot. So it's much better if you perform the counts when there's no one at the bar or there's minimal interruptions. We typically will count the bar area and the walk-in cooler first, in one of those first. The reason being the bar area, we're going to get out of the way of the bartenders, and the walk-in cooler, often there's beer deliveries, or if there are beer deliveries coming in, it can complicate things a lot if a whole bunch of new product gets put into the beer cooler, because it gets confusing which is new product, which is old. But also if we have less space and new kegs in there, it's difficult to access the kegs we need to weigh. So after counting is complete and we work through the entire counting map, next we'll go and grab a stack of invoices. If it's a full service client, typically they'll keep those in a folder somewhere in the back office. For our super clients or particularly big clients, because of the time it requires to enter the invoices, they'll have submitted those invoices in advance. That's becoming increasingly popular with our really big clients, just to cut out the hour it can take to enter those invoices. But as I said, in most cases we'll actually do the invoice entering at the bar from the physical paper copies. So once we've completed the count and the invoices, that's basically the most I guess boring, time-consuming piece of collecting data, and that's all taken all those tasks are taken care of in the C tool. And so the final step before we move over to the R or reporting tool is to solve our C tool errors. So what I mean by those is that the software has a bunch of automated error checks which stop us making errors. Essentially, each error check is related to some error we've made in the past, and then realize we could have a check to stop us making that error in future. In actual fact, you won't be able to continue or update the R tool from the C tool if you don't solve those C tool errors. Again, we'll have specific training on that, but basically just understand that they're little helpers that are going to stop you having errors in your reports. So after we've completed that, we're going to switch over to the R tool and start doing our calculations related to reporting. We're getting closer. So the one other piece of data collection we have to do is to run the point of sale report. So most bars will have a dedicated back of house computer, meaning that in the office we'll have a regular PC, and it allows you to sign into the point of sale back of house, meaning that's the place we're going to, for instance, if you were a manager making changes to buttons, that's where you'd be operating, but it's also where you can run all of the reports. Some point of sale systems, some of the more inexpensive ones, tablet based, instead of using a dedicated back of house computer, you'll actually use the front of house point of sale stations that the servers are normally using to ring in drinks, in which case there's normally sort of a reports or a back of house setting. But either way, we run that point of sale report, we export it onto a USB stick, and then we paste it into the R tool so that the software knows which buttons have been pressed, how many sales there were, all that good stuff. So there's not so much to do in the R tool in terms of data entry. Simply pasting the point of sale report is all the data entry we have to do. So after that's done, similarly we solve a bunch of R tool errors. This will be things like adding new recipes. So the software is automatically going to know which buttons we have seen before, and so any new point of sale buttons that have been created since the last time we did inventory, those will appear, and we'll have to figure out what recipes are for those. So if it's draft beer, it'll be a 14.5 ounce pour in a 16 ounce glass. For cocktails, it's normally pretty obvious by the name of the product, and then for signature drinks and maybe things like that, you'll probably have to confirm with communication sheet or confirm with a manager what precisely they're using. After you've done that, we'll consult the spill or communication sheet. Not all of our clients have these or use them, but they all should. So the idea here is that in addition to writing on invoices or to ringing things into the point of sale as the best way of communicating and letting us know what's going on, there's always going to be exceptions and strange things that happen. And so we encourage our managers and our clients to keep a bar-eye communication sheet behind the bar on a clipboard. And then anytime they ring things in as open liquor, or they have unusual things, or one product is used in place of another, or they have a large party and so they ring up an open liquor for $1,000, they'll write notes in all of those occasions to tell us what's going on if they create a new recipe. And that will obviously, the more that we can get our clients to put this sort of information in advance, it saves us a lot of work chasing after errors that really could have just been resolved by knowing what was going on in the first place or up front. I mentioned that before, but it's really encouraging your clients to use a spill sheet and communicate things in advance, to write them down at the time. It's really important. What they're typically going to think is, oh, I'm going to email you, or I'll tell you when I'm in there. It won't happen. They'll be busy. So it's really important that we get everyone in the habit of using that communication sheet. At this point, we've inputted all the sort of raw data provided us to the client. And actually, this is my favorite bit of process, because this is where we switch over from doing kind of mundane, systematic, just following through our counts and our invoice entering, which is, kind of mindless work, honestly. Now we get into actually using our skills and judgment to see what's going on. So next we're going to do our analysis error resolution. So that means looking at the analysis worksheet in the R tool and looking through line by line at every single product and spotting products that we look like we have errors on. It will become pretty obvious to you over time, when things look off. And what you'll find is we try to begin with new clients, look at least 5 items and investigate in detail at least 5 items. When we're starting off, and it's more like 10. But it's important. Basically, what we're looking for is perhaps the 5 or 10 largest variances, largest errors. We're going to focus our attention on those and try and resolve and figure out what's going wrong with those. And over time, these errors with clients should get smaller and smaller, so that you'll find when you're starting off with a new client, you'll have big errors like 12 bottles of this missing, and it will be due to invoicing or a miscount. And then with a client you've been working with for a year, all of those sort of basic errors should have been ironed out by now. And so the sort of errors you'll be looking at will be a half bottle off by this, and you'll realize we need to dial in a recipe for this, or perhaps we haven't lined up a recipe correctly. But you'll see these little variances that become glaring when we've got rid of the larger things. So it's kind of like a funnel approach, is that we do the wide and big errors initially, and then over time we'll find that the errors and the variances should get smaller and smaller. So After that, we should hopefully have resolved some of these errors, but there's a good chance that you won't have found the missing piece of information about that. And so before we start finalizing and writing up the report, we'll meet with the manager or send an email. Ideally, we'll schedule our audits on days when the manager is available. And that obviously means that we don't have to email back and forth or have a phone call on their day off, but it's a lot more efficient if we can meet with the manager in person. Ideally, they'll be in the morning doing their thing, perhaps doing some office work, and then they're available for our questions. Final step is to review the variance worksheet or the VAR worksheet in the R tool. That simply provides a simple comparison of the this current cycle results to the last one. What you'll find is that there's typically not huge variances. So if a client got 80% overall and they suddenly get 95, that to me would be a red flag, and would think, unless there's a reason, it's quite unlikely to get that big of an improvement. Similarly, if they've got 80 last time and they got 83, that's sort of in the ballpark. But by comparing current results to last one, that might provide helpful in terms of spotting errors. And also we can review the largest errors in each category and just make sure that we haven't missed anything. So that's sort of double checking on the analysis. Here's the analysis stage. We did line by line checking. This is a different type of checking where we check the overall results compared to last week and see how that works. In some cases, particularly again our big clients, will have to send out the order guide. What I mean by that is when we do the counts, the software automatically creates a list of what needs to be ordered, and oftentimes it might be not until late in the evening or afternoon that you're going to send out the actual PDF report with all of your comments, and you still at this stage have to write those comments. But if you've scheduled the audit on the day what they need to do their orders, the manager is honestly going to be more interested in getting their order in for the week than they are in looking at the results. And so it's a good piece of service if we're able to send out that order guide as soon as we've done our checks. The other thing is we use it as a little bit of a tool, because the order guide is based on today's current counts. If we haven't reviewed and found errors and resolved the errors yet on the current counts, the order guide becomes a lot less useful. And so there's a bit of give and take here between the manager and Bar I, in that if they're available and help us resolve the errors and they've provided all the information we need, we'll get that order guide out in time. But if they're not providing us with the information we need, then we kind of can use it as a tool and say, I don't have the ability to send out this order guide because we haven't verified these results yet, or I can't actually send out the order guide because my numbers are so messed up because I'm missing a bunch of invoices, and that provides some motivation for them to get their ducks in a row and provide the information you need. After that's done, basically results should be complete, and so we'll look at the RTOL checklist. This is just on the errors tab, just a list of checking through that we've completed the following steps. A step on that I like to, within that list, we have one of the items is do something to speed up next week's collection. What the idea is here is to figure out one little thing that's slowing you down. Maybe it's the organization of a particular shelf, maybe it's the way they're ringing a particular product, but it's very easy to get into the mode of trying to rush and get through this audit and get on to the next client and constantly just glossing over little problems. But when we get to the end, it's great practice to get in the habit of making one little change each week. If we do that every week, pretty quickly the effect of those changes will be cumulative, and we'll get to the point where the inventory counts are much smoother. If you're in the habit of rushing through things and never address the root causes of problems, you're going to have slow, error-filled, annoying audits. And so that you said an important part of that auto checklist is choosing something that we can do to try and speed things up. Next, we fill out the GAF index. You're familiar, actually, we call the GAF index the efficiency index. It basically gives the manager a score out of 10 in terms of how they're doing and providing us all the information we need. We call it the GAF index, or give a fuck index, or internally, because it really gives a score as to how good of a job the manager is doing at providing us with the information we need. It's a useful tool, and again, as we get more and more clients, often, or bigger clients, often the person you're directly working with, perhaps the bar manager, is not the same person as hired you, maybe the owner, and so this is a way to basically provide information to the owner about whether we're getting the information we need. So once that is complete, we'll go ahead and write the report comments. Those are actually written in a PowerPoint document and then pasted into Excel, allowing us to have those look in our pretty reports. Finally, we do some final checks on the report. Make sure that numbers are off, that it looks correct. Send the report out. When I say send it, we will send it out to all involved parties. So if in doubt, CC everybody. So in our case, with the main, I guess, corporate-owned bar store in Denver, this gets quite complicated. If Matt is sending out reports, he'll CC me, the other owner, so I can just check and be available if we've got problems. Scott is CC'd because he's doing the bookkeeping, and that's how he knows that a report has been completed. And then I'll email every single person we're directly working with at the client. So when you're working with big clients, it might be an owner, a beverage manager, a bar manager, a couple of bartenders. It can be quite a long list, but it's important to get everybody onto that report so we all are communicating from one place. And then, not to be forgotten, an important step is being available for follow-up. Typically you'll send these out, and most of the time you're not going to hear back about them. Normally no news is good news, but we definitely try and get some engagement. So if you ever get a response from a customer, it's great to respond to it and expand or explain what they're asking about. In general, we don't get as much said involvement and engagement as we'd like. So anytime we get a response, we try and sort of reward that response by responding to them, giving them a piece of information. If they're asking a question, maybe there's a blog article from our blog that might be relevant to the question they're asking, and it's great to provide that sort of information. And just overall, as we talked at the very start of this, make sure that the experience of using BarI is a positive one, and that we're providing additional information to them, as and when it's useful. So they ask you a question about point of sale programming, it's really great to send them an article to explain how to do that. So there we are on basically the steps or the stages of an audit. Next, we're going to look at our keyboard shortcuts.